What's up everybody, it is Generalkidd here today, and for today's video we are going to be tackling the question of how did the Prophet of Truth get infected by the flood? So, a lot of people have been asking me this question for quite a while now, and I decided to finally take a crack at it. I don't usually do lore videos like I said in previous videos, but I figured I'd try to answer your questions on this one, because it is kind of an interesting thought. So, a lot of people have been asking this question because during this scene on the mission to Covenant near the end, one of the later cutscenes, when the Prophet of Truth is talking to the Arbiter, he suddenly starts breathing out flood, mess like spore stuff, and he also starts growing flood biomass on him and tentacles out of him. So clearly he's in a state of partial infection right now, and the Gravemind is also speaking through him, so he's clearly like infected by the flood. But people ask, how did he get infected by the flood? You don't see any flood infection forms outright infecting him. It's not apparent how he got infected. He's just starting to randomly get infected. So the answer to that, at least it was my theory, is that it's flood spores. Flood spores are the most basic flood forms. They're like these tiny little microscopic flood forms that basically looks like speck of dust in the air. And as you just saw there on Halo 2 Anniversary, it has much more of a form to it. And they're just floating around, and they can be produced in massive amounts really quickly, and they can spread around really quickly. And according to Halo lore, they are very dangerous because if you breathe enough of them in, it will actually cause you to get infected. Sometimes it could be slowly infected or partially infected, or other times it could be like really quickly you can get infected if there's enough infection for flood spores all around you. So what's the evidence for Prophet of Truth breathing in flood infection forms? Well, on a mission Floodgate, you can actually see a lot of flood spores floating around, and this one Marine here, even before the infection forms jump down and start infecting the other Marines, that Marine just randomly drops to the ground and starts getting infected. No flood infection form had jumped on him or climbed into him. He just pretty much randomly gets infected out of nowhere. So I always thought that, and you might assume this as well, that he was just simply scripted to get infected and that most people never would have noticed. But I think there's a little bit more to that than just randomly being scripted to get infected, because there's some more evidence throughout the rest of the Halo game, Halo 3, of flood spores being able to infect certain characters. So here, with this Marine here, obviously we see him get infected by an infection form. It climbs right into him, and we see how the whole process works. And actually, a lot of people have asked me to save this Marine for a while, which is actually really easy, which is why I never did a video on it, because it's pretty clear. But if we save that Marine, and I'm going to show you right now, sometimes if you save him, actually a lot of times when you save him, he's all fine and dandy afterwards. So that should answer your questions about what happens if you, or can you save this Marine, which is yes, you can. But he's not always savable. Sometimes, and I'm going to revert here a little bit, sometimes, even if you save him, he still gets infected for seemingly no reason. He's not scripted to get infected. He's just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and flood infection forms jump on him. But if you save him, sometimes he's still just, like that one Marine outside, he still infects himself, apparently. And you can still see like flood spores floating around in the air. So I believe this is another case of a character in Halo 3 breathing in too many flood spores and then still getting infected. So what could have caused those flood spores? I don't know. Perhaps killing the infection forms will release a lot of flood spores. But on some maps with flood, you can see a lot of flood spores in the air, and some of them are more apparent than others. So let's take a look here. We're on a mission High Charity. Let's get a closer look at some of the flood spores that Truth could have possibly breathed in. So here we see a few specks. These are simpler spores, and there's also more complex spores, like this one here. It actually looks like that one, that tree seed from that movie Avatar. Not The Last Airbender, but the James Cameron movie. Looks just like that in my opinion. But anyway, that's beside the point. This is what one of the flood spores look like in Halo 3, and other ones look like just a glowing speck. And they're floating around everywhere on missions with flood. So it's pretty it's pretty safe to say that it's a safe bet that the Prophet of Truth got infected because he breathed in too many flood spores, or at least a little bit of flood spores, which is what caused him to slowly get infected. Now, here we are in the Mission of the Covenant. Some flood forms, such as the flood tank here, you may never notice this, but the flood tank actually sometimes spits out infection forms, as well as a lot of flood biomass and particles, and possibly flood spores. So it stands to reason that it's possible flood infection forms, or other flood combat forms, or even flood pure forms like this, can release flood spores. And we know for a fact that the Flood were a little bit faster than Master Chief and the Arbiter were, because if we skip a little bit ahead, we see plenty of Flood bodies lying around here. So that means they partially got the truth before we did, and it's possible they released enough Flood spores to have truth infected by the Flood. So that is what I believe to be the reason behind how the Prophet of Truth got infected by the Flood. It was subtle, but I believe it was due to him breathing in too many flood spores, and that's what led to the slow infection in his case. But yeah, so there you have it, guys. That is our little game theory for the Prophet of Truth. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like as always, and if you want to see more, or if there's anything else you want me to check out or look into, just let me know and I'll do my best to look into it, of course. And just post your thoughts and comments on that or whatever. But other than that, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.